was no one sitting in those, but I took my arm and swept around in the water to make sure no one was down underneath the dash area. After I made that assessment, I made a peek towards the back of the SUV and noticed that there was a car seat right behind the driver's seat. And in that car seat, from what I could tell, nobody was sitting in it. But again, I made a quick sweep with my hand to make sure there was nothing in there. And what I wanted to do was get that back door open behind the driver's seat to the passenger compartment to make a better assessment of the back of that vehicle, but I was unable to. It was locked, the window was still intact, and I had no way of breaking that window with me. So I ended up sticking my head back one more time, making a quick assessment, and what I saw were in front of me, or I guess in between the second and third row of seats, looked like 2 feet and 2 hands. And at first I thought it was just a doll, a kid's toy of some sort. So I reached back as far as I could, and it was a pretty far reach for me. I was able to grab a foot and pulled across the water to me, and ended up finding out pretty quickly that, hey, this is an infant baby. So at that time I had pulled him up on top of the roof of the vehicle, and at that time the baby had a tone to his arms and legs but was not breathing on his own. I had started CPR, gave him a few breaths, and after a few breaths I noticed he started spitting up some water, rolled him on his side and allowed him to get some of that water out, continued with a couple more breaths. At that point, I was trying to make communication back to my partner and the 2 police officers on the dock as far as the response from the fire department, how long they were going to be yet, knowing that they were bringing a boat and personnel that could wear, cold water suits and that. And I think the response was that they hadn't even left the station yet. They were delayed by a train in getting their equipment and manpower out there. So I think the exact words were, "You got to be kidding me," because the last thing that I wanted to do was go back into that water, because being up on top of the roof felt pretty good as far as temperature wise. So after making a quick determination that I was now getting myself into trouble and that I was freezing and would have to make a quick decision whether or not to stay or to go, I determined that for the best for the baby and for myself that we needed to go. So at that point I dove back into the water, did some swimming, I guess more or less on my back while holding the baby above the water. And I swam for maybe 10 or 15 feet before I was able to touch the ground, and at that point I was able to touch ground and I was able to run the rest of the way through the water. And at the dock, I handed the baby off to one of our police officers and Ty, and they rushed him over to the ambulance. And at that point, I believe the baby was breathing. More or less treatment in the ambulance was just supportive care. Ty had corresponded with the helicopter to get it available for transport to St. Louis. And then mostly our efforts were just warming the baby and supportive care from that point. So.